It was a gray October morning when Emily Parker first noticed something strange about Maple Street Bakery. The shop had always been there, a quaint little place with faded white walls, a chipped green door, and a large display window that was often fogged up from the warmth inside. She remembered walking past it as a child, catching whiffs of fresh cinnamon rolls and sweetbread, the kind of smell that made you stop mid-step. But the place had been closed for nearly 2 years after the sudden death of its owner, Mrs. June Whittaker, a sweet, soft-spoken woman who always seemed to know your favorite pastry before you asked for it. Emily had returned to her hometown of Ashton Falls only a month earlier. Life in Chicago had worn her down. The noise, the fast pace, the endless competition. She thought a slower life in the small town where she grew up might be the peace she needed. She rented a tiny apartment above the old bookstore, took a job at the library, and tried to settle in. One rainy afternoon, as she was walking home from work, she noticed the For Lease sign had been removed from the bakery window. The interior was lit up for the first time in years, and the air smelled faintly of baked bread despite the drizzle. Curious, she crossed the street, peered in through the glass, and saw a figure moving behind the counter. The man was tall, wearing a crisp white apron over a dark shirt. His back was to her as he arranged something on a tray. When he finally turned around, she saw he had sharp features, deep-set eyes, and a smile that didn't quite reach them. He noticed her looking and gestured for her to come in. The warmth inside wrapped around her instantly, chasing away the chill from outside. The air was heavy with the scent of butter and sugar, and the display cases were filled with pastries, golden croissants, glossy fruit tarts, delicate eclairs. Everything looked perfect, almost too perfect. "Welcome," the man said. "You must be one of the locals. I'm Daniel." Emily introduced herself, explaining that she'd grown up here but hadn't seen anyone take over the bakery until now. "I just reopened yesterday," he said. "Thought I'd bring a little life back to this place." There was something in his tone that made her unsure if he meant the words literally or figuratively. She asked if he'd known Mrs. Whittaker, but his expression flickered, and he simply said, "I've heard stories." She bought a small loaf of sourdough and left, but as she walked away, she glanced back through the window. Daniel was standing perfectly still behind the counter, staring directly at her, his expression blank. She told herself she was just imagining it. The first night she ate the bread, she swore it tasted different from anything she'd ever had, rich, almost intoxicating, like it was made from some ingredient she couldn't place. But that night, she dreamed of the bakery. In her dream, the warm glow of the shop was gone. The windows were blackened, the shelves empty, and a shadow moved in the back, its form shifting and stretching in unnatural ways. When it turned, its face was hidden beneath a dark cloth, but its eyes glowed like embers. She woke in a cold sweat. Over the next week, she visited the bakery a few more times, each time telling herself it was just because the pastries were so good. But she also found herself drawn there for reasons she couldn't explain. Daniel was always polite, always smiling, yet she never saw him actually bake. The pastries were just there each morning, flawless and warm. One evening, after closing up at the library, she passed the bakery and saw the lights still on. It was well past midnight, but Daniel was inside, moving in slow, deliberate motions. She couldn't see clearly, but it looked as though he was speaking to someone in the kitchen. The strange part was, when she peeked around the side of the building, there was no one else there. He was alone, speaking to the empty air. The dreams came more often after that. She began seeing Mrs. Whittaker in them, pale, her apron stained, her voice urgent but muffled, like she was speaking through water. Emily could never make out what she was saying, but it filled her with dread. Then came the night of the storm. Rain hammered the streets, the wind howled through the alleyways, and the town was swallowed in darkness when the power went out. Emily lit a candle in her apartment, but even over the sound of the storm, she thought she heard something faint singing, like an old lullaby. It was coming from outside. Against her better judgment, she grabbed her coat and went to the window. Across the street, the bakery's lights were still on. Not just on, glowing, almost too bright, spilling golden light into the rain. The singing was louder now. She stepped outside, her shoes splashing through puddles as she crossed the street. When she opened the bakery door, the bell above it didn't ring. Inside, the warmth was overwhelming. The display cases were gone, replaced by long tables covered with what looked like loaves of bread, hundreds of them. The smell was dizzying. Daniel was at the far end of the room, his back to her. "You shouldn't be here," he said without turning around. Her heart pounded. "What's going on? Where did all this come from?" He turned slowly, and she saw his smile for what it really was, not warmth, but hunger. "They're not customers, Emily," he said softly. "They're offerings." The storm roared outside, the wind rattling the windows, but the heat in the bakery was suffocating. She realized the bread on the tables wasn't normal. The shapes beneath the crust looked almost human. Daniel took a step closer. Every town has its hungers. Here, it's the bakery. Mrs. Whitaker knew that. She fed it. That's why she lasted so long. Emily backed toward the door, her hand fumbling for the handle. But when she looked back, the door wasn't there anymore, just another wall lined with shelves. "You've tasted it," Daniel whispered. "Now it's part of you. And you'll feed it too." The heat, the smell, the air itself seemed to press in on her. The singing returned, louder now, voices weaving together in an eerie harmony. She saw shapes moving behind the shelves, pale hands reaching out from the darkness. The rest of that night was a blur. The smell of burning sugar, the feeling of unseen hands grabbing her, and the sound of Daniel's voice chanting something low and ancient. When she woke, she was in her apartment, her clothes damp, her hands covered in flour. The bakery was closed the next day. And the next. No one in town seemed to notice. When Emily asked about it, people just frowned and said there hadn't been a bakery there in years. But some nights, when the rain falls and the wind carries the smell of fresh bread, she hears the faint sound of the bell above the bakery door. And she knows it's still there, waiting.